I met Michael a couple years ago at the Moon Lake gathering, and while he was there, he presented his dowsing theories in a book that he wrote, and he talked about magnetic flux lines and the Earth's gravitational field, and how a dowsing rod can be affected by those, and point out veins in the earth and other metal objects in the earth. And what he explained made a lot of sense to me, so I bought his book and built a dowsing rod, and I went out in the backyard and promptly doused up a water line, and I did it over and over again, and it did exactly what he said it would do. And then just recently I went to La Plata Canyon, Colorado with him. I spent 4 days. He was teaching me how to douse and showing me how it works, and I watched him douse several veins there, and I myself doused one of the veins, and it worked for me. So I believe that Michael's figured it out. Michael, tell us about how you got into dowsing in the first place.
Oh, it started out, my family was a prospecting family. My dad raised all his kids as prospectors. Uranium,
Yeah.
Sandra Swell. We was down there with uranium claims on 3 ancient river channels that had uranium in them. And we had 3 claim blocks for miles and miles and miles. And then we started messing around Moon Lake, 1967, and we found the old pine mine and the 2 Spanish tunnels into the slide rock next to it. We didn't know how to douse or nothing. We were just searching by like regular prospectors. The only way we would have known anything up Moon Lake is by dowsing. And that comes out by my dad and I worked in a coal mine. 1976 might have been. Probably was. 76, the coal mine was shut down because the processing plant ran out of water. And they couldn't load no train cars with coal. So we were shut down for a week. The company was going bankrupt over it. And they couldn't find, it was a mile-long old wooden pipeline that ran the old Castlegate coal camp area back in the 1920s and 30s is when that was put in. It was a mile long from the main line down by carbon power plant, which is gone now. They dismantled it. They dug for a week with the backhoe, just kept digging and digging all over up and down that mile where they thought they'd see moisture. And finally this worker with my dad, a little bit older than him, said that's enough, and he went out to his truck and got his dowsing rod out. And they went and doused the pipelines down. He knew where it was. He doused them sideways to find where the pipe was, and he kept zigzagging that way. And then where he got to where he could feel a little more energy, he went straight along the pipeline. And as soon as he got to the leak, the dowsing rod started turning on him. And he stopped and he says, "Your leak is right here." And he brought the back over, dug right down, and that's where the leak was. They fixed it and we was back into the coal. My dad witnessed that, and he's an electrician, and he's going, "What the heck?" And he goes, he knew then that dowsing works, that it wasn't just mumble jumble. So we grew up on a small farm, and we doused the water lines around the farm first, got going on that, and then we started burying copper lines and dowsing with it. And start studying actually what is the physics behind this. Why is it doing that? And then we come up with the elemental magnetic flux lines, which it is. The same thing that makes a metal detector work. The elemental magnetic flux lines is just part of the story. We'll get into that later. So we started messing with the elemental magnetic flux lines and learned how to use them. And we even experimented, because my dad was smart, and he thought of a circle with the elemental magnetic flux lines, centering that circle around the center of the elemental magnetic flux line field, and then divide that into 4 right-angled triangles. And that was the key to working physics into dowsing. Once we did that, we got on a roll. We could start telling how deep it was buried by backing up, backwards. We figured the forward part. We tried depth dowsing forward, because we knew physics-wise with that circle and the elemental magnetic flux lines coming in, we should be able to tell depth with that. We got all messed up trying to depth dowse walking forward. So we experimented and depth dowsed walking backwards. We found out that was the field. We backed up, restudied that, what's the physics in this, and we come up with the middle of the elemental mass that you're dowsing, a gold vein or whatever. The center of it has the most elemental magnetic flux line field. And when them elemental magnetic flux lines come up to the earth, as soon as they hit the surface, they start spreading because of gravity. They got a little bit of weight to them, and they'll bowl till they come right back down to the earth. And with that, we knew we was onto it with backing up, because it worked out, because we did our water pipes with the backhoe on the farm, and found that was the secret. You got to walk backwards. If you study dowsing at all, back a couple hundred years ago, there was a bishop, well-renowned for dowsing. He always located the water source, but every time he tried to depth dowse it, he was off, because he was walking forward, and he's picking up them elemental magnetic flux line fields. It's coming from the exact center, coming over from him, and going down into the earth. And he might have hit the depth dowsing once in a while right on, but he was more miss than hit. And we tried that on the farm too, and it worked out. That's exactly what happened. That's the only part of dowsing you have to go backwards, is for depth from the exact center. So we get going on that. We started using it on our uranium claims too we had on the desert. My dad had a scintillator. That's like a Geiger counter, jacked up. It's a lot better. But it has a little chip in it that's got uranium, so you can set your scintillator. A Geiger counter, you just point it up in the air and set it to 0, because the Earth's radiation is always changing, especially in the 60s when they was doing all the radiation bombs testing. The scintillator, you have to adjust it because it's more precise with a little round chip of plastic that's got a little tiny button of uranium. So we was messing with that dowsing, and it worked. We was dowsing our edges on that. We was getting with the metal, with the Geiger counters, and it all worked out the same. We got real excited with the dowsing to do it up. We messed around a little bit, and it was turning on us and that. We didn't know what the heck we was doing until we got up to the pump, and it started helicoptering circles, because we figured out how to build a modern ball bearing dowsing rod by then. We did it down on the farm, advanced it up from where we was just using colt hangers and that, because we was going to use physics where you elevate the dowsing rods so you have something to gauge off, which it works. And you know what you're doing, it doesn't just turn. And we'll get into that later on on grading. So we knew that this helicopter meant grade, and we started figuring that out, why. And we got back to do a little paperwork and do a little bit of physics. It's because when you're on the exact center, your elemental magnetic flux lines are coming up. As soon as they hit the surface, gravity grabs them as they're starting to go up, and it's pulling them back down into the earth. You got the most right in the center, so it has to be a tug of war that's making that spin, where it's being energized from one side of the exact center near the surface, then the other side of the exact center, and it gets it spinning. And with dowsing, using physics, not asking questions, standing still and that, using physics and dowsing, once you stop moving, the dowsing rod de-energizes. It's not energized anymore. You can keep your hand moving. As soon as it stops, no energy. We're working off electricity. The whole universe works off electricity. So, with that tug of war, and the universe runs off electricity, we'll get to that later. But that tug of war, the higher the grade is, the more elemental magnetic flux lines there are down there in the center. When you got extremely high grade, they'd be real close together. When you got low grade, the elemental magnetic flux lines in the center would be spread way apart. You know, I'm emphasizing here. And we figured, well, that must be how it grades. You can get it to spin in the center. And then we also found out too the hard way, you got to squeeze on that dowsing rod when you're dowsing, because you got to put enough neuron electricity in you. Like I said, we're running off electricity. This dowsing rod is electrical generator and electrical motor at the same time. We're energizing the dowsing rod, and the dowsing rod load we have hooked to the dowsing rod, and most of the power is coming from the ground, same power, coming to the dowsing rod, the same element that you have on the dowsing rod load, and it's putting more power in it than you are. But if you don't squeeze that enough, without getting into too much electrical theory, you're not putting enough, I'll put it in layman's terms, you're not putting enough flow of electrons out there. Because believe it or not, these electrons are flowing all around us all the time. We don't even know it's shooting out of the earth from all the elements. So we figured out the grade on it, we figured out the edges. When you come up to the left hand, when you come up to the outside edge of a gold vein, it'll make a left-hand turn, a hold a 90-degree turn. And when you go past that, it'll break. And when you get to the center, it'll spin counterclockwise. And it'll stop when you go past the center, slow down, stop. And when you get to the outside edge, it'll point 90 degrees to the right and then break after you go past it and go in front of you again. Once we got that basics figured out, we knew we had something. So we went over all the property up there, about 6 square miles back and forth, both north and south, you know, zigzagging north and south and east and west. Started figuring out all these fissures up there, lining them up. At first, it messed us up, because there are ore chutes that come off these fissures that run north and south to mine. And the ore chutes screwed us up at first until we did quite a bit of dowsing and mapping. And with that, we come to the conclusion, through dowsing only, has about 15 parallel fissures that come out in the V, running north and south. And these, they spread out from down below from the volcanics. This is a laccolith volcanic situation. It's not a shield volcano. It's laccolith, where it raises up, shoots out, raises up, shoots out. Right up there. On the fissures, we lined them up north and south on maps. Then we started going all the way through them and even the ore chutes and started lining them up on hand maps. Then we figured that the ones that barely turned down below, that was the low grade. So we kept heading west, and the further we headed west, the higher grade on the helicopter. I call that helicoptering when it spins in the middle. There's a lot of language I had to put in the book. The Art of Dowsing, Separating Science from Superstition. There's a lot of language I had to use to get us all on the same page, because you get a lot of dowsers who can't talk to each other. So I used physics and what sounded logical for the process, and I named them. So later on we can all communicate with each other and be on the same page instead of everybody on a different page. So we figured these fissures out. When we got to in a helicopter and like that, we knew we was onto it. So we took that and took it to some known high-grade gold mine areas and tried the same thing, and it worked out right to the T. So that's how we verified our own physics through it. And this was back in the 1970s. By the 1980s, we had it figured out. It was down pat.